Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. I'm so looking forward to this one. Pete Coors from Molson Coors, thank you for being here.
It's great to be here with you, John.
Now, when I was a kid, I'm not saying I snuck any of your product out of my parents' refrigerator, but on occasion they would let me have one with dinner, and it was terrific. But I remember this so well, that we would always have friends coming back from the East, and we'd always do the same tour. We'd take them to Central City, Red Rocks, Coors Brewery. It was this wonderful loop, and they would all carry back as much as they could pack in their trunks. And then I remember watching Smokey and the Bandit and realized, wait a second, smuggling out Coors beer from Colorado was actually a big thing. I never quite understood what that was as a kid. Now I finally do. What was it?
Well, look, we were in 11 states. We were brewing great beer. People liked it. It was unique. Could only get it here. And so people would take it back. The funny thing, though, in the first of the year, we used to get a lot of complaints, consumer complaints about our beer. They'd come out in August, and they'd taken the tour. They'd bought beer, and they put it in the trunk, 120 degrees. They'd taken it home. They put it in a shed, 120 degrees. Christmas, oh yeah, let's have that. We brought that Coors back. Let's have the Coors. Let's have the Coors for our party. And it tastes very good because our beer, no beer holds up like that. So they would write complaints, and my uncle would always write them back and say, well, take this letter and the retailer, and they'll replace one case of beer. And next time you're in Colorado, we appreciate you visiting us, all that stuff. So it was a blessing and a curse all at the same time.
Let me ask you about the history of this, because I don't think there's a business that is more connected with Colorado than Coors. I mean, it's part of Colorado history. And I want to ask you about it now. It's your great-grandfather that came here and started it.
Adolf immigrated to this country somewhere around the late 1860s. Landed in Baltimore. He came without. He was a stowaway. He didn't pay his passage. He didn't have a passport.
Really?
He had no money.
I think we got a picture of him too. Handsome guy.
He was quite a dapper guy. The harbor master let him work off his passage. He got miscellaneous jobs, worked his way across the country, worked in a brewery, and he had been an apprentice brewer.
He was a laborer. I mean, this guy, even though he knew how to brew, he worked on a lot of things.
He'd been an apprentice 3 times. His father died when he was quite young. He'd been an apprentice 3 times. Once his father's business trade was in flour milling. Mm-hmm. He was a flour miller for 3 years, and then he indentured himself as a bookbinder and printer, and then he indentured himself as a brewer for 3 additional years. And we don't know exactly what happened. We think that he was probably
We don't know exactly what happened.
We think he was probably on his way to get conscripted in the Kaiser's army.
And that's why he left.
And got to Hamburg, and either with a friend or two or just on his own, jumped on a ship and came here. Landed in Baltimore.
All right, this was a time when there were all sorts of breweries. I mean, there were lots of small breweries, and I'm always amazed because here in Colorado, the Tivoli Brewery, the remnants are still there, and Zang's, is it, or some others?
Zang's, oh yeah, there were quite a few. There were 21 breweries in Colorado, and Coors was pretty small.
Why did he make a brewery?
We don't know exactly. We think he knew how to brew beer. There was a good German constituency here, and I think some of his buddies said, Adolf, why don't you?
One of us needs to make the brew.
One of us needs to be making beer, and so he did, and started a small brewery. He found a source of spring water in Golden on his way up to sell things to the miners and the Central City and Blackhawk.
And the spelling of his name was very different. It was K-O-H-R?
Well, when he came here, it was C-O-O-R-S, but his birth certificate had him as K-O-R-S. His father signed K-O-H-R-S. And I suspect it was a Dutch magistrate who decided that the spelling should be C-O-O-R-S, which is really technically Dutch. So I think it depended on who won the last war or the last battle.
And the rumors that you'll be changing your name back to the original spelling?
No chance.
No chance.
No.
But how did this little brewery and I think we got a picture of it from 1886 or so. How did this little brewery then last the test of time? I mean, what is it that made this one win over all the other little breweries in Colorado in the 1800s?
I think just a lot of determination. You know, prior to Prohibition, there were almost 4,000 breweries in the country. There were well over 20 just here in Colorado. Now there's 250 plus breweries in Colorado, so the whole thing has gone full circle. But they were very, very small. And then Prohibition, he was successful. Prohibition came along. And
how did he survive Prohibition?
Well, he did. He actually died in 1929, 4 years before Prohibition was repealed.
He must have seen it coming.
And he had pretty much worked through his fortune, which we estimate to be about $2 million, which in those days was real money. So Adolf Jr., his oldest son, kind of kept things going. We had the ceramics company. We had a relationship with the dairy. It was all dairy. Between Golden and Denver was all dairy, the Robinson Dairy,
right.
and so we had a symbiotic relationship. We would give them our spent grains, and they would give us milk for making malted milk. We were the largest malted milk manufacturer in the company. Supplied the Mars Candy Company until 1954, actually.
Really?
But so it was odds and ends that
but during Prohibition,
those are the kinds of things we did. We had a malting facility, so we made malted milk. First year after Prohibition ended, first full year, 1934, we did 126,000 barrels. So we'd be a decent-sized craft brewer by today's standards.
Wow. And since we're talking about the other stuff, you did all sorts of, not textiles, but ceramics and other things. The packaging for beer has changed over the years. I mean, because you've got to streamline this. I had heard, and help me understand this, that the aluminum can for beer was developed at Coors. I mean, that there was aluminum can, there were steel cans for other things, but you really couldn't hold beer in a steel can, is what I had heard.
Well, Bill Coors was grandson of Adolf.
This is your uncle.
My uncle decided that beer in steel cans was okay, but long term was not a very good package for beer. First of all, it was a three-piece can. It had a flat piece that was rolled in, and then a seam,
Right.
and then a top and a lid and a bottom put on it. And it wasn't as guaranteed sterile package. We wanted to be our beer to be sterile and have no microorganisms, beer spoilage organisms, not harmful physically, psychosomatically sometimes. So he went on a quest to develop a container that would be like glass that would be friendly for beer. So he started out impact extruding. They used to make toothpaste tubes out of impact extruded aluminum.
Right. You keep pounding it until it grew.
Pounded in, yeah, and we started there and realized we could never ramp that up to 12-ounce cans. So we developed the drawn iron process.
And now every soda can, every beer can basically uses this process.
Yeah, for a long time, actually, we actually gave our technology that we developed to the industry so that we could promote it. And the reason we wanted to do that was because aluminum is recyclable for value. Steel is recyclable, but there's no intrinsic value in steel, and so recycling was a big deal for us.
Yeah, I mean, this is an eco story a lot of people don't get, which is to make aluminum, it takes a lot of power, but it's easy to recycle, and there was a market for it. You guys had this incredible technology, and you just gave it away, and now every pop you have is in your technology.
Yeah.
You missed the boat on that one.
No, not necessarily. I think we actually we created a boat that we could all ride on, and it helped the entire beverage industry.
All right. Now I remember Coors Light coming in, a can where you actually had to use your thumb to poke the hole through the can.
Oh, the old press.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering, can I still sue on the cuts that I got on my thumb? Is there statute of limitations over that?
Statute of limitations all gone on that. Yeah. We actually did two things. The first one we had was actually had a sealant, and you had a little tab that you would release the pressure, and a bigger tab that
I remember
you
it
drink
well.
out of. And then the technical geniuses at the container plant came up with a lid that was just scored. There was no need to put sealant. And so you press one side, release, and the other side you press in. But the sound of that aluminum scraping and getting your thumb,
Right. And before that, you had the pull tabs, but then you had a litter with the pull tabs.
Right.
So now you have the flip.
Now we have and flipped the stay-on tab, which is what it's called. So there have been all kinds of variations that have been worked on, but that's still the
Do you
standard.
remember the party ball? You remember?
Dear, yeah.
The idea that you can't buy a keg, but you get a beach ball full of beer.
A plastic
Yeah.
ball in a box and with tapping device and so forth. And there's all kinds of different variations of what was the party ball, mostly smaller.
Tell me the story about Coors Light, because I've heard all sorts of different folklore on this. And I remember when it was, I think it was Miller Lite that came out, and it caught on. The idea of, less calories, but you can still have a beer was caught on. And you guys said, we got to get into this game. And if I understand the story, it wasn't a unanimous thought in the family business that this is the way you should go, or how big it would be, or how to do it.
No, it was a little difficult. My brother Jeff was in charge of the operational side of the business. So he had engineering, production, operations, procurement, all that kind of technical stuff. And I had sales and marketing. His guys, actually, a guy by the name of Chuck Hahn, developed Coors Light.
The formula for the beer.
Yes, and he had a R&D, and so we had a beer that we knew we liked, but Jeff's problem was we were one brand in 8 packages. That was a pretty nice operation, and Jeff said if we have another brand, it's going to mess up operations. And so we went to lunch one day, and I wrote down on a napkin, which I wish I still had, Anheuser-Busch, Budweiser, Michelob, Bud Light, Natural Light, Busch, and several others. And I wrote down the Miller side, had Miller Lite, Miller High Life, Miller Genuine Draft, and Old Milwaukee, and all these brands. And I put Coors. And I said, Coors. That's all we had. I said, Jeff, we cannot be all things to all people. And so we left that lunch and agreed that we'd give it a try. It started off very slowly. We thought it would never be a big part of our total business.
How much did you predict that Coors Light would be of the total market share of Coors?
In the first year or so, I thought maybe it'll be 5% of our total business, and it went to 70%.
Wow.
So it's light beer is refreshing, and it applies to all the big brands who have.
And Coors Light is the #1 selling light beer in the country, isn't it?
No, Bud Light's the #1. Coors Light's #2. Miller Light's #3.
Well, not in Colorado.
No, probably not in Colorado. I don't know what the numbers are in Colorado right now.
But Coors Brewery is still the place where the banquet, the original, is made.
It's the only brewery that we will brew Coors Banquet, which is the original brand, is in Golden. We have 8 breweries now with a MillerCoors combination, the JV. We have breweries in North Carolina and Georgia and Virginia, Ohio, Texas, Colorado, and California. But Colorado, the brewery in Golden, is the only brewery where we brew the original Coors Banquet beer and ship it all around the country, and then now even into Canada.
Talk a little bit about the joint venture. Now that everything is global, including Coors beer, you partnered with wasn't Miller a former competitor, and now you guys are working together.
Well, in 2005, we combined with Molson in Canada. We're the #1 light beer in Canada, #1 brand for Molson in Canada, and we had initially a license agreement, and then it converted. Finally, we formed a merged company, and then in 2007 we did a deal just for the U.S. with SAB Miller, which is a global company, and Molson Coors, which is our global company, to form a JV to put Miller and Coors together, and all the brands. 134 different brands now in the portfolio. It's crazy, but we did that for synergy reasons. We've saved over $1 billion.
Warehouses, over $1 billion.
Over $1 billion, which we've been able to convert back into marketing and facilities and so forth. And our distributors, It used to be single brand distributors. Now the distributors are all multi-brands. Most of them have several dozen suppliers, craft brewers along with the major brewers. Many of our distributors were having Miller products and Coors products in their same distributorship. So it's just kind of a natural.
All right, so you have all this success. You've done all these great things. More success, more success. I'm sure there must have been some things you wouldn't have done, Zima, if you had known Zima, that maybe they wouldn't be as popular as they would be. So,
Well,
anything that you wouldn't have done before?
we've had some brands that we put in the marketplace that probably.
Tell me about Zima. I've never understood exactly what Zima was, even when it was out.
Well, Zima was the original.
It was like a wine cooler with malt, right?
It was really the original flavored malt beverage.
Right.
It came out. It's brewed. It was carbon filtered to take out the color, and then we added some little bit of flavoring. But mostly people like to use Jolly Ranchers. They'd put a Jolly Rancher strawberry or something in it and flavor it themselves. A very, very, very good product. And then we got too smart for ourselves. So one thing I wouldn't have done again is we decided if Zima, which was a clear beverage, was good, then Zima Gold would be even better. And we killed the.
Wouldn't Zima Gold be beer?
It was basically beer with a different flavor. So it was.
Now, do you make it any longer, Zima?
No, we do. Actually, it's a big brand in Japan. So it's the only place we sell it.
There's a joke there, and I don't know what it is.
No, there's every brewery. Whether it's Anheuser-Busch or Miller or us or all of them have made brand mistakes and cost a lot of money. And
now, talk to me a little bit about the new world, in that Colorado is the Napa Valley for craft brewers. I mean, just as your great-grandfather was a small fish with all these other bigger local breweries all over the state, now you said there's over 200 of these. Do you worry about them someday becoming a big rival? And you actually have interest in some of these as well, don't you?
Well, I've described them as being mosquitoes. They buzz around, and none of them are very big. There are some large craft brewers. Not the biggest in Colorado, obviously, is New Belgium, which is Fat Tire, and they've done extremely well. So what happens with all these? There's over 250 breweries now in Colorado trying to sell to the same retailers and getting shelf space.
Right.
So they're squeezing shelf space, and they make life a little bit more difficult for us. But it's it's a very interesting thing. We've helped many of them out with brewing materials and technology and so forth. But we're not part of their club. The Brewers Association, actually, for the U.S., which is the Craft Brewers Group, is located in Boulder and run out of Boulder. But they don't let big guys in there. You have to be.
You guys have a relationship with, isn't it Blue Moon Brewing?
Yeah. So 20 years ago, we started Blue Moon, which was a Belgian wheat beer, which is cloudy, and you drink it with a slice of orange. And I tried to kill it twice. I said, "There's no way I'm going to drink a beer that you put an orange slice in." I love the brand now. It's
so you almost killed it twice.
I did. Now it's the largest craft beer. If you describe craft as not the traditional premium or light beers, lagers, in the country, and it's been a tremendous success for us. We've done Herman Joseph, which now is just in Colorado. We do.
Now, I remember Herman Joseph in the 80s coming out. This was a premier beer. Now, I thought it was named after your great-grandfather. I thought those were his middle names, Herman Joseph.
No,
you're breaking my heart here.
Well, we combined some other family names. Adolf Jr.'s youngest brother was named Herman, and his father's name was Joseph, and we kind of put it all together to make Herman Joseph.
You're going to tell me Betty Crocker doesn't exist either.
I don't have any idea about Betty Crocker.
And so that's still here in Colorado. And you also did, what was the red beer that you had? Killian's
Irish Red Ale. It's which is a pretty good size little brand for us. It was a license agreement, actually still is a license agreement to Heineken
Oh, really?
Who bought the original brewery that started Killian's, actually in France, believe it or not. I know it sounds weird, but there's no...
Wait a minute. Killian's Irish beer, Irish red beer, which came out of Coors in Colorado, was bought by Heineken in France.
It's a little confusing, but there was a French marketing company called Brasserie Française that came up with an idea of developing a brand with an Irish heritage, and there was actually a George Killian. There's a George Killian Let brewery in Ireland, but it was defunct. So they took the concept and built the brand. Their marketing agency and our marketing agency were the same company, and so our marketing guys came to us. There's an interesting little brand over in France called George Killian's Irish Red. Why don't you take a look at it? And we did, and we liked the idea. We had to change the flavor quite a bit in order to satisfy what we thought was
American taste.
American taste.
Yeah.
But it's been a tremendous success. We also have a little company called AC Golden Brewing Company, which is doing Colorado Native and some other things.
That's you?
Absolutely.
I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
That's some good stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't know Blue Moon was us either.
All right, well,
So,
Sean, we won't tell anybody.
Blue Moon Brewing Company, which was started right down here at Sandlot at Coors Field.
Talk to me a little bit about advertising, because as Coors broke out of the Rocky Mountain region, you needed to become an advertising nationwide. I mean, that was part of you only advertising in 12 states or 11 states, and now you have to do it every place. I've seen Coors Light parties, and by the way, if you have the number for the Coors twins, a lot of people have been asking, and if they're doing well and if they're all right, let me know. You did a series of commercials which I thought were really successful, talking about it as a Colorado brand. Mark Harmon did a whole bunch of ads which I thought were terrific, but those were years ago, and now I see a train coming by. I've never seen that train here in Colorado. I'd like to.
No,
to get on board.
I think it's in a studio somewhere. I don't know for sure. Yeah, I think you talk about things that you might do differently. We did some advertising campaigns over the years that I'm not too proud of, frankly. But in the last several years, I think we've had some really responsible, good advertising. Advertising is kind of a strange thing because you spend a lot of money on it, and I think.
You don't really know if it works or not, do you?
If half of it works and half doesn't, you just don't know which half. So that's what the advertising guys say, and so you do the whole deal. It's a combination of media advertising, TV, radio. Now the big deal is social media, because young drinkers aren't watching TV as much as us old guys, and so they're getting their information from their friends about what the best bar is, a new beer that they've discovered. You got to try this one.
And there's a ton of brand loyalty on a beer, and that when this is my beer. Growing up in Colorado, it's Coors Light. This is the beer you have.
There still is, but what we find now is, particularly with younger beer drinkers, that they may have Coors Light or Coors Banquet or some other major brand in their acceptable set, but they have a bigger set. So they'll have half a dozen different craft beers if they can get it someplace, or they'll go someplace and they said, "Do you have such and such?" And they said, "No, we don't carry that one." I said, "Well, let me try this one." But then they might have one and say, "I think I'll go back and have a Coors Light." It's a very different market today than it was just 10 or 20 years ago.
It's got to be tough to keep up with it. And now that you've got 200 competitors just in Colorado alone that are doing these other beers, but still, you're pumping out more Coors Light and Coors Banquet than ever. I mean, it's
actually, the report this morning, our volume in the last 52 weeks was down slightly.
That's because one of my relatives died. But other than that,
one of our friends must have not be around anymore, changed brands. But so it's been a bit of a struggle. The beer industry in general has been sluggish. Interesting thing is that the high end, the high price beers are growing very nicely. So. Things like Miller Fortune, which is a brand that we developed with higher alcohol, The ciders are growing. Smith & Forge is our brand that's designed particularly for male macho beer drinkers, more heartier brew, exactly. And they're all higher. Red's Apple Ale is part of our system.
Wow.
And they're all a little bit higher pricing. The low end in this economy, which is extraordinarily interesting to me, is declining by double digits. So Keystone is declining, and as is Busch from Anheuser-Busch, and as are Milwaukee's Best, and the low end of the business.
Really?
And I think the answer to that, John, is that the high end, top half of the economy has been doing very, very well. The bottom half of our economy is doing terrible. So, and yet they still want to participate in brands that make them look like they have some status. So imports, whether it's Heineken or the Mexican beers now.
So basically, even if you don't have a lot of money, you're going to project that you do by having a higher end brew.
Yeah, and I see it happening all the time. The guys will come in and they'll buy a 6-pack instead of a 12-pack of a premium beer. They'll buy a 6-pack or something of something else. So it's a very interesting market, and for us to be able to compete in that environment is challenging.
Pete, I've been wanting to talk to you so long. This is so great. I mean, it's that Colorado and Coors go hand in hand, and I wanted to share the story. So I really appreciate you spending some time with us.
It's great being with you.
I was kind of hoping you might bring a bottle or something.
Yeah,
Next time maybe you wouldn't be so cheap. But
how do you know we don't have some in
That's
here?
a good point. Look for me on KHOW Radio. Check out the Independence Institute, independenceinstitute.org, and we'll see you next week.